Hello viewers, I'm recording this video on Thursday the 8th of March and this is an unplanned video, but there have been some developments in the UK which I felt I needed to talk about, and those developments are related to child sex abuse. Now if you follow my channel, particularly if you follow the Watchtower in Focus videos, you'll know that we recently did an episode on what's been happening in the Netherlands, where 250 victims of child sex abuse have come forward and shared their stories with reclaimed voices. And as a result of that, politicians and the Dutch Parliament and the law enforcement agencies have been motivated to take action and investigate Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, as far as the UK is concerned, we don't currently have reclaimed voices in the UK. There are initiatives that are starting up now. But what Sarah Marsh is trying to do, she's trying to investigate this story from the UK perspective, and she's trying to find out just how bad the problem is. And to that end, Sarah has written an article for The Guardian newspaper, a very well-respected newspaper in the UK, and she is asking for victims of child sex abuse from among Jehovah's Witnesses in the UK to come forward, and she has even included a form where people can tell their stories. Now, I find this a fantastic development. It's exactly the sort of thing, the sort of initiative we need to find out how bad the problem is. And to help me dissect this and talk about it and share her perspective, it's an absolute pleasure to welcome back to the channel Karen Morgan, who has joined multiple episodes of Watchtower in Focus. Karen, thanks so much for joining me.
Hi Lloyd, thank you for having me.
I'm really thrilled that you could dedicate some of your time to be with me and talk about this fascinating development. What are your thoughts on this? Are you pleased to see an initiative where victims of child sex abuse can come forward?
I mean, yeah, obviously, I think it's a massive step forward. I was talking to my husband about this earlier, about this article, because thinking back to when I went to the police and my case was going to court, which I think was 2014, even only that short time ago, there wasn't really much going on in the public with regards to Jehovah's Witnesses and child abuse. Certainly nothing really that I was aware of. And I did honestly feel like I must be one of a very small minority. So having now, we're in the start of this year and having this article come out, and I think, wow, what a long way we've come. And that's everybody as well, Lloyd. That's people like yourself, all the activists, all the victims, the journalists who've got involved. I mean, it's incredible to think that we're now at this stage where they may actually look at Jehovah's Witnesses as their own investigation. I think that's amazing.
Because it's one thing for me to put a call out and say, let's say through JW Survey, to say, right, I want to hear from victims. It would be another thing, you know, for another activist to do that, or to put a call out on Twitter or on Facebook or what have you. But for one of the biggest newspapers in the UK to say, actually, we've got this, and we're going to find out how big this problem is. And obviously the whole point of a newspaper is that it has reach. It has... this will be getting seen even by believing Jehovah's Witnesses who are perhaps victims of child sex abuse and feel that they need to do something even though they believe in the religion. So I'm genuinely excited about the potential for this.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I'm always a bit hesitant. I think, oh, do I want to get really excited about something now in case it all falls apart? Do you know what I mean? But I'm just really, really hoping that this is going to be kind of the start of the end for them in how they deal with child abuse. And I really, really hope that people do come forward and do contact her, because I'm sure it can be done anonymously as well, but at least they will then see how many people this actually affects in the UK.
And just to explain a little bit more about the background, I gave a very kind of minimalist explanation of what's going on. But if you follow my channel, you'll know I've already spoken a little bit about ICSA, which is the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse. Now, inexplicably, they do not currently have an investigation for Jehovah's Witnesses. As we speak, they're investigating the Anglican Church. There are other religious denominations that they're looking at, but you would think, Karen, that of all of the organisations that they might want to look at in terms of institutional child sex abuse, Jehovah's Witnesses would be high on the list. So far, ICSA is not giving a dedicated investigation. So it's encouraging to, when you read the article, to see that the motive behind this initiative is to get ICSA to look at Jehovah's Witnesses, because once you have that critical mass of survivors coming forward, then the people who are involved with ICSA, they would need to be fired if they didn't take action. When you have one group of people, hundreds of survivors coming forward. Yeah,
and I kind of imagine somebody sat at a desk receiving all the complaints and suddenly thinking, hang on a minute, these are all Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah.
We really need to do something about it. That's kind of what I'm hoping has happened, and that they've realised this is a much bigger problem than we would have thought.
Yeah.
Because Jehovah's Witnesses, for the most part, are very under the radar, aren't they? Unless somebody dies of a blood transfusion, there's not really that much else you ever see in the newspapers regarding Jehovah's Witnesses. Not really. So I think this has probably been a massive wake-up call for the investigation as well.
Yeah, you like to think that at some point the penny will drop. Now, one thing that I actually included in the appendix to my book is an extrapolation of what the numbers would be for Britain, Canada and the United States based on the figures that were gleaned by the Australian Royal Commission. So in other words, you take the 1006 pedophiles, you take the 1800 victims, and you say, well, based on those numbers, if we look at the yearbook figures for these other countries, what would the ratios be? And how many victims and perpetrators would that result in? I ran those numbers for Britain, Canada and the United States. For the United States, it would be just over 30,000 victims and 17,000 perpetrators since 1950. For Canada, it would be 3,500 victims and 1,900, just over 1,900 perpetrators. And for Britain, it would be 4,000 victims, just over, and 2,300 perpetrators. Karen, you'd like to think that 4,000 victims going back to 1950, obviously some of them may have passed away, some for various reasons won't want to talk about what's happened to them, but you'd like to think that there would at least be a few hundred in there who can talk to The Guardian.
Yeah, of course. I mean, if there's anybody watching this who's thinking, oh, I don't know, especially if you're still an active Jehovah's Witness and you're a victim, and I can understand why you might feel under pressure not to do anything about it. But like I say, take it from me and my own personal experience that actually reporting it is part of your healing process. The elders and the organisation haven't been abused. It's you that's been abused, and nobody should tell you what you can and can't do about it. It's so important that we get everybody on board and that people are allowed to come forward without feeling fear.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. And I'm glad you spoke about that reticence, because obviously I haven't been a victim. I'm very, very glad not to have been a victim, but you have. And you understand that you don't always want to talk about what's happened to you. And sometimes I can imagine you would probably feel to some extent re-victimized by having to go through the whole process again, even if it was with law enforcement or a journalist or what have you. But at the same time, you have this issue of, well, if you don't talk about it to someone, the perpetrator is on the loose and free to reoffend. So yeah. So it is a dilemma, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a dilemma, and I mean the organisation are very clever in how they word things and how they use things, and you do feel fear. There's no denying it. People are afraid to report it. I mean, I ended up getting disfellowship at 17. My family didn't speak to me, so I can completely understand why, especially people who are still in the Jehovah's Witnesses, why they would just be terrified about speaking out about it.
But the good thing is, I mean, as you've mentioned, Karen, there is a degree of care that's been put into this reporting process. So, for example, if you go on the web page, you'll notice that it's actually an encrypted form filling process. So the security measures have been taken. There's even an even more secure process if you opt for it, where you can give a secure drop service. And then when you fill in your details, your name, your experience, you can add a file if you want to, perhaps a handwritten letter, and you can indicate very clearly the extent to which you want this information to be used or not used. So I think it's a very well thought out form that the Guardian have put together. And again, I would urge anyone who has been through this terrible ordeal, who happens to be from Britain. I wish it could be for all countries, quite frankly. But if you're from the UK and you're a victim of child sex abuse as a Jehovah's Witness, please at least read the article and give it some careful thought as to whether you can be involved.
Yeah, and I mean, all they're basically wanting to know is, have you been a victim of abuse within the Jehovah's Witnesses? It doesn't mean that your name and your story are going to be printed in the newspaper. It is just a case of, let's get an idea of how many we've got so that we can see whether it's worth us doing an independent investigation.
Indeed. And at the end of the day, what can we possibly lose by having this investigated and by finding out how bad the problem is? Because if it's half as bad as it was in Australia, and we have every reason to think it will be pretty much just the same, then there are children at risk. Yeah,
exactly. And the bottom line is, that's what it's all about. The only thing we've ever wanted is for them to just make some little changes to their policy so that it protects children. And that's all we've ever asked for.
Indeed. Well, Karen, I'm really glad that you could join me for this brief kind of call to action video. Viewers, I understand that the vast majority of you watching this won't be from the UK, but if you could at least share this video and make sure it gets widely circulated, who knows, perhaps we will get the numbers through that we need so that ICSA can give this the attention that it thoroughly deserves. But Karen, I'm really grateful to you for joining me for this video and sharing some of your perspectives. It really is very much valued. Thank you.
That's okay. Thank you for asking me.
Okay, so viewers, I hope you've enjoyed this video. Please don't forget to subscribe for more videos, and as always, thank you for watching.